My wife and I just got hitched and purchased a wonderful home. We were happy to find it since it was at the corner of a charming little neighborhood and was likely the prettiest property on the block. In our front yard, we've been considering installing a little fish pond. So, one day we walked outdoors to begin looking for a suitable spot for it. We already know where to go. And as we began to measure out the items, a guy came up to us from the street. He seemed to be around middle-aged and rather typical. As he moved to enter our yard, I believed he was a neighbor. Most of the individuals on our street were familiar to us, but I did not recognize him. He approached us, and I approached him to see how I could assist him. He extended his hand to shake and introduced himself as Randy, adding that he had just moved in close by. He said that a tree had broken in his front yard and requested assistance in moving it away from his driveway. He remarked that he had seen my wife and me outside and had thought we seemed to be in good shape. That being the case, he chose to ask us. He instructed us to follow him after I suggested that we work together to attempt to assist him. We moved down our street till it came to an end. Our street and the one after it was separated by a little river and a wooded area. We crossed the bridge, which had a little tunnel on it, and then started to make our way into the woods for about 30 feet until we reached the next tree. But as quickly as we crossed the bridge, I caught sight of a guy hiding behind a tree while wearing a full-face mask out of the corner of my eye. Before even my brain has time to digest this, the other side of the walkway was making noise. Also wearing a complete mask, I noticed another guy come out of the trees. One of the males was walking directly toward my wife as she yelled, which I noticed. To attempt to stop him, I ran. I simultaneously felt the other guy grip me. He took me down by tackling me. However, I met the other guy in the process. Randy simply stood there and observed all that was happening as both guys now had power over me. My wife made an effort to assist me while I was battling the guys, but they defeated us. She managed to escape in order to flee and contact the police. The guys began to bash me up rather badly, despite the best efforts I made to protect myself. They kicked and hit me a few times before demanding my money and phone, which I handed them. As soon as they had them, I heard a red pickup truck come up and saw all the guys getting inside it before it sped off. The cops were on their way, my wife informed me when she returned. Despite being quite badly pommeling, I did not feel like anything was broken. Shortly after the police showed there, I gave them all the information I could remember, but since the guys were hiding their faces completely, I could only positively identify Randy in the vehicle. I was rushed to the hospital, but I did not have any major wounds, so I was let out the same day. Unfortunately, no one has yet been located. I was fortunate to just sustain minor injuries. The weekend before last was unusually warm. I made the decision to perform some yard work since the weather was great. My home is on a 4-acre lot, and since there is a little wooded area in the rear and diverse plants blooming everywhere, the yard requires some maintenance. I retrieved the lawnmower from the garage and mowed the grass. Then, after making the decision to rake the yard's leaves and grass clippings, I walked outside to my shed to get my rakes. In my backyard, the shed was situated just inside the wood's entrance. Upon entering and opening the door, I saw that everything was in disarray. I had not recently been in the shed. Nevertheless, I was aware that I had not abandoned the situation in that manner. The floor was littered with messed up stuff. Additional blankets covered in food wrappers were also visible. It seemed as if someone had lived there. It gave me the chills just looking at it. I took a close look around to ensure none was inside the shed at that moment. It may have only measured 10 feet broad by 30 feet long. There was nobody there when I turned around. However, it was evident that someone had only lately moved in. I made the decision to get a lock for my shed as soon as I saw this. Since I did not have anything precious in it, I had not really had one. And I certainly did not anticipate that anyone would be living there. I purchased a high-security lock that same day of the shop just in case whoever was residing there made a decision to return. The following day, I installed it. I hoped that whoever was there had left by this point. However, I placed the lock just in case, and I felt significantly better about it once they could not really return it. But that evening, the sound of smashing glass below startled me awake. Where it was originating from was a mystery to me. However, as soon as I saw what had occurred to my shed, I quickly called 911. Before the cops arrived, I waited in my bedroom, but did not hear any disturbance at all. I headed downstairs when they did. My kitchen window was shattered, and I noticed a rock on the floor next to it that had been hurled through the window. No one was located despite a thorough check by the cops of my home. I then informed the police about my storage shed. When we came back outside, we saw that the door and shed lock had both received several scars that were most likely from Iraq. The result we reached was that whoever had been living there had moved back. However, they attempted to break into Iraq when they discovered it was locked. When they were unable to, they became angry and hurled it through my glass. After checking my entire yard and the surrounding woods, the cops never discovered who it was. I'm praying they do not return since it's been a week. I was 13 years old when this incident occurred. We are situated in a normal residential area. In those days, my parents paid me $30 for mowing the lawn every weekend throughout the summer. Given that we had a fine push mower and a little yard, I did not hate it at all. One day, when I was about finished mowing the front yard, I observed a vehicle driving down the street. It was not someone I knew who lived there, however. It was moving really slowly and would periodically halt in front of homes. As it drew nearer, I could see that it was one of those old large vans. It had to be a lost person attempting to find the proper home on our block, I reasoned. When it was almost directly in front of my home, it ceased. It remained still for almost 30 seconds. Though I tried to identify the driver by peering through the driver's window, I was unable to. They were just wearing shades that I could make out. An uncomfortably long time passed as it sat there. The idea crossed my mind that the driver may even get out of the vehicle. Being a timid 13-year-old, I began to feel a little anxious. I knew my parents were not going to have a baby. As a result, I was unsure of his identity. I chose to walk into the rear since I felt uneasy and was about through with the front yard. I was working in the rear when I heard the van leaving, and that made me feel relieved. I then went back and completed the front yard. After that, I walked inside and essentially forgot about anything before continuing with my day. Later that night, I went to bed at a rather late hour in order to get some sleep. Because it was the weekend in summer, I had remained up late playing video games. It was hot outdoors, so I had my window open. I then closed my eyes as I lay in bed. An automobile making its way down the street was audible to me. It was not until I heard what sounded like the automobile slowing down and stopping close to the home that I gave any thought to. I raised my head a bit and peered out the window. When I identified the vehicle as the van that I had previously seen parked in front of my home, I almost passed out. I convinced myself that I was insane and that everything would be okay. But I could not help but sense that something was quite unsettling. I kept an eye on the van, expecting to see someone get out and go to a different home or to see it drive away. I was aware that if I did not stop thinking about it, I would not be able to relax or sleep at all. For at least 5 minutes, the vehicles were stationary with their engines going. Later, the engine turned off. For a little more, the vehicle stayed there. I sat there the whole time with my head down to just have a view out the window with my eyes. When the door on the other side of the vehicle finally opened and shut, I heard it. Soon after that, I witnessed a guy stroll straight into our front yard from behind it. Even though it was pitch black outside, I could see that guy was clothed in dark clothing and was sporting a cap and a pair of sunglasses. He was wearing a backpack as well, and when I noticed him enter our yard, I froze in fear. Then I observed that he was going right towards my window. The man may have seen, but I'm very sure he did, as I hurried to close it as quickly as I could. I managed to shut it as far as I could before drawing the blinds over it. I heard the guy tap on the window a little while later. Then I heard it make additional sounds. But I refrained from looking. I was around 5 feet from the window sitting on my bed, immobilized with panic. My shades started to jiggle, and then they were slightly pulled back, and I heard the window open. I eventually succeeded in getting out of bed and fleeing at that moment. I hurried from my room and into my parents' bedroom down the hall. I hurried inside to wake them up. I was making an effort to describe to them why a guy was in my bedroom. After hearing a commotion coming from my bedroom, my dad woke up, grabbed his mobile, and contacted 911, even though he did not first believe me. He then yelled at the guy outside the bedroom door that he was going to murder him. He went out of the room and returned a short while later, stating the guy had gone. The guy, according to him, had returned to the window. A little time later, the cops showed up, got our information, and recorded our narrative. They asked whether we consented to a search of the home. We concurred despite our first belief that the guy had departed. But a few minutes later, we heard yelling coming from my room. And sure enough, the guy who had been hidden in my bedroom closet was an older-looking person with a gray beard when they came out. I'm quite appreciative that the cops chose to search our home.